Hello everyone. Tonight we're diving into a story that might make you reconsider the value of family respect and self-worth. It's a story of how a mother, a widow, and a woman who thought she had given everything to her family was suddenly reduced to a mere afterthought, pushed aside by the very people she loved. But what happens when we stop letting others dictate our worth? What happens when we decide to take back control? Well, that's exactly what you're about to find out. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And if you're watching this from a specific city, comment below to let me know how far this story has reached. Now let's dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for a soft hum, and let's begin tonight's journey together. I was tired. After a week-long trip to visit my sister in Colorado, I couldn't wait to get home. My arms ached for the comfort of my favorite armchair, and the idea of sinking into it with a cup of tea sounded like the perfect end to a long journey. Instead, I stood in front of my house, staring at 4 of my suitcases lined up neatly on the sidewalk, the rain starting to fall in heavy drops, and a note. If you want to stay here, we have the garage. Your dear daughter-in-law, Lydia. The words blurred together as I read them again, and a feeling of disbelief washed over me. I had lived in this house for 35 years. Richard and I had built it together, from the ground up when our son Thomas was just a baby. Every decision, every wall, every tree in the yard, these were our choices. Our investments in the home we created together. After Richard passed away 2 years ago, I agreed to sign the house over to Thomas and Lydia legally, but I continued to pay the mortgage. After all, I wanted to make sure they didn't struggle with the financial burden. But now here I was, locked out of my own home, my suitcases like an afterthought on the sidewalk with a note that implied the garage was the only place left for me. I felt the cold sting of humiliation, but also confusion. How had it come to this? I stood frozen in place, the rain soaking my coat, my mind racing. The sound of the taxi pulling away was lost in the growing storm, but I had already made up my mind. I needed confirmation before I allowed myself to collapse into disbelief. I pulled out my phone, dialing the bank before the taxi had even disappeared from view. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Wilson. How can I assist you?" the bank representative said brightly. "Yes, I'm calling to confirm my mortgage payment. I want to make sure it went through as scheduled." After a short pause, the voice on the other end confirmed, "Yes, Mrs. Wilson. Your automatic payment of $1,967 was processed last Friday. Everything looks in order." "Thank you," I whispered, hanging up. The heavy drop of rain splashed against my forehead, and I realized my hands were trembling. I stood there for a long moment staring at my suitcases, the cold seeping into my bones as if the sky was in sync with my broken heart. The house where I had raised my son, where Richard and I had made memories, was now out of my reach. The garage door stood ajar, an unspoken invitation, but it felt more like a prison than a place of refuge. I pushed it open, stepping into the dimly lit space. There, against one wall, was a twin mattress unceremoniously placed. Next to it, a small nightstand with a lamp. My clothes hung on a portable rack, and scattered around the room were boxes marked "Mom's Stuff" in Lydia's hasty handwriting. I sank onto the mattress, my feet pressing against the cold concrete floor. Through the small window, I could see the house, my house, the place where I had built a life with Richard. And now it felt like I was just a stranger looking in. A notification buzzed on my phone. It was a text from Thomas. "Mom, we need the space. Lydia's been asking for a home office for months. The garage apartment has everything you need. Don't make this difficult." "Don't make this difficult." I read the words again, as if my son was the one being inconvenienced by me. I had always been the one to make things work. I had put in the hours, the care, the sacrifices. And now I was the problem. I didn't respond to his text. Instead, I let my emotions flow freely. The tears came quietly at first, sliding down my cheeks as I thought of everything I had done for him. The late nights with him when he had asthma as a child. The second job I took to pay for his college when Richard's business faltered. The weekends I spent watching his children, letting him and Lydia have their couple time. And now this. This was my reward. The sting of betrayal wasn't just about the house. It was the culmination of years of being taken for granted, of being pushed aside when I was no longer useful to them. I sat there in the garage, surrounded by boxes of memories, and I felt smaller than I ever had before. But I wasn't ready to give up, not yet. I picked up the phone and dialed Martha, my oldest and dearest friend. She'd always been there for me, even when Thomas and Lydia hadn't been. She didn't ask questions, didn't hesitate when she heard the pain in my voice. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said. I hung up and sat back against the wall of the garage, the dampness seeping through my coat, the bitterness of the situation settling in. I had built this house with my own hands. I had been a mother, a wife, a provider. And now I was left in a garage like an unwanted guest, an afterthought. But I wasn't just Richard's widow or Thomas's mother. I was Audrey Wilson. And I wasn't about to let them make me invisible anymore. As I waited for Martha to arrive, I sat on the thin mattress, my hands trembling not from the cold, but from the overwhelming sense of injustice. I could still hear the distant hum of the storm outside, the rain tapping against the garage door like an unrelenting reminder of the brokenness in my life. Martha had always been a pillar of strength, and I knew that if anyone could help me regain my sense of self, it was her. In the years we'd been friends, she had seen me through some of the hardest moments of my life, from Richard's cancer diagnosis to raising Thomas as a single mother after his father passed away. But this was different. My own son and daughter-in-law had turned against me in a way I never expected. And now, sitting in the very garage where my life's memories were packed away in boxes, I realized I had been living a life on their terms, never truly standing up for myself. When the knock came at the door, I was ready. I stood up, wiped my face, and opened it to find Martha. Standing there, with her usual no-nonsense expression, a bag of snacks slung over her shoulder. "I'm so sorry," she said softly, as she pulled me into a tight hug. "You're right. This shouldn't have happened." "Thanks for coming," I whispered, pulling back to look at her. "I feel like I've lost everything." "You haven't lost everything," Martha said firmly. "Not yet. You still have you." That was all I needed to hear. After I finished telling Martha what had happened, I sat down at her kitchen table, the hot cup of tea in front of me, a welcome comfort. Her eyes were narrowed with determination as she processed everything. "Lydia's pushing you out and Thomas is going along with it," Martha said slowly, her voice quiet but filled with anger. "It's their house now, but you've been paying the mortgage for 2 years. They can't just throw you out like this." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I don't even know where to begin. How did I let it go this far? "Because you've been putting everyone else's needs before your own," Martha said matter-of-factly. "And that's not a bad thing. But you can't be invisible anymore, Audrey. Not to them, and not to yourself. You built this life with Richard. It's your home as much as theirs. And if they think they can just erase you from it, well, it's time to remind them who you really are." I looked at her, a spark of something igniting deep inside me. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had a plan. It wasn't much yet, but I was ready to fight. "I'm done being used," I said, more to myself than to Martha. I've been afraid of losing them, of being alone. But now, I'm not afraid anymore. I'm done paying the mortgage. I'll stop the payments, and they'll have to face the consequences. Martha raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. I like it. It's a start. But I think we need to take it further. What do you mean? We need to get legal help, she said. And I'm not just talking about canceling payments. You need to protect yourself, Audrey. You've been making those mortgage payments for over 2 years. Legally, that could give you some rights. I nodded slowly. It felt like a foreign concept using the system to fight for what was rightfully mine. But Martha was right. I couldn't just stand by and let my son and his wife sell my home out from under me. I'll talk to Brian, I said, referring to Martha's nephew, the lawyer. But what about my stuff? All of my things are still in that house. I can't just leave it all behind. Martha stood up, walking over to the kitchen counter and pulling out her phone. I'm not going to let them push you around anymore. I'll go with you to get your things. If they give you trouble, we'll take it further. No one is going to get away with this. I felt a sense of relief wash over me as I realized I wasn't alone in this. For the first time in a long while, I was starting to feel like myself again. Audrey Wilson, not just a mother or a widow, but a woman with a voice, a woman with the right to stand her ground. The next morning, I woke up feeling something that had been absent for too long: determination. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew I had to take action. I couldn't let Lydia and Thomas dictate the terms of my life anymore. I called Brian, and as expected, he agreed to meet with me. His office was in a small building near the center of town, but it felt like the kind of place where things got done. I was nervous as I drove there, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, but I knew this was the right move. I couldn't allow myself to be steamrolled anymore. Brian, dressed in his usual smart casual attire, greeted me with a firm handshake. Mrs. Wilson, I've heard a lot about your situation. Let's see how we can help. We sat down and I explained everything, how I had been paying the mortgage, how Lydia and Thomas had pushed me out of my own home, and how now they were planning to sell the house without even discussing it with me. Brian listened carefully, his expression focused. It sounds like you have a strong case. You've been making those payments, and from what you've told me, you have a financial interest in that property. We can look into this and see if there's any way to secure your rights, even if your name's not on the title. My heart sank slightly as he continued. But you need to be prepared. This won't be an easy fight, and it could take some time. If you're serious about pursuing this, we'll have to act fast. I nodded, determined. I don't want to fight them, but I won't just sit back and let them take everything Richard and I built together. I have every right to be here, and I'm going to make sure they understand that. The next few days were a whirlwind. I barely had time to catch my breath between meetings with Brian, phone calls to my bank, and trips back to my house to collect the rest of my belongings. Each step felt like I was stepping further away from the life I had known for 35 years and into something completely unfamiliar yet strangely empowering. Brian had wasted no time sending a formal letter to Lydia and Thomas demanding they cease any actions regarding the sale of the house until we could figure out the legal situation. As soon as I saw the letter in my hands, I felt a sense of relief. Finally, someone was standing up for me. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't just reacting to everything that was happening around me, I was taking charge. But that sense of relief was short-lived. The phone calls from Thomas started coming in, each one more insistent than the last. Mom, we need to talk. His voice echoed in my mind. This is getting out of hand. You can't just stop paying the mortgage. What about our credit? What about Emma's future? Every time he called, it felt like a knife to my chest. The man I had raised my son, the one I had sacrificed so much for, was now acting like the very people I had always feared, entitled, selfish, and utterly indifferent to the pain he was causing. I had to force myself to hang up every time, refusing to let his manipulative words break me down. You've been paying for this house for 2 years, Audrey. Brian had told me one morning after I had shared yet another one of Thomas's emotionally charged phone calls. They don't get to keep using you. You have legal recourse. We can pursue an equitable lien. That house doesn't just belong to them because it's on paper, it's your home too. I could feel the weight of his words settling over me like a fog. The idea that I could take legal action and not only stop the sale, but possibly even regain control of the property was a glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak situation. But still, it was hard to shake the emotional toll. Each time I went to the house, seeing the stark changes that Lydia had made to the rooms, hearing the silence where Richard's laughter had once echoed, it felt like a betrayal. The house no longer felt like home. It felt like a mausoleum to a life I once knew. I couldn't help but think back to when I first walked into that house with Richard. We had been so young, so full of dreams. The walls had been bare, waiting for us to fill them with memories. And we did slowly, piece by piece, room by room. Every corner of that house had a story of love, of laughter, of hardship, of growth. Now all of it felt hollow, as if it was slipping away piece by piece into the hands of people who didn't appreciate it. But I couldn't afford to get lost in nostalgia. I had to keep moving forward. Martha, of course, was by my side the entire time. After my meeting with Brian, she insisted on driving me to the house to help me gather the last of my things. I was grateful for her unwavering support, but as we stood in the living room, surrounded by boxes filled with the remnants of my life, I couldn't help but feel like I was being erased. "Look at this," Martha said, her voice a mixture of disbelief and anger. "They've taken down every single picture of Richard, all your memories." I glanced around at the bare walls. It was as if they were trying to scrub away the past, and for a moment, it almost felt like they were succeeding. I had to take a deep breath, trying to calm the rising tide of emotion inside me. "Don't let them win, Audrey." Martha continued, reading the look on my face. "You don't have to let them erase you. The house may have changed, but what you built, what you gave, no one can take that away from you." Her words grounded me, and I nodded, silently, determined to stay strong. As I moved more boxes into the car, I couldn't help but think of the way Thomas and Lydia had so casually dismissed everything I had done for them, all of the sacrifices I'd made. They had no idea what it had cost me to give them what I did, or how much it had hurt to be treated this way. The following week was a blur of phone calls and legal paperwork. Brian had made it clear that he would be pushing for a hearing, but he warned me it could take months before we reached a resolution. The weight of the uncertainty hung over me, but for the first time in ages, I felt like I was finally in control of my own destiny. I wasn't going to just sit back and let them take everything from me. I was going to fight for what was mine. Despite the mounting stress, there were small victories along the way. I had found a small, inexpensive apartment near the town center, a cozy little place where I could finally breathe again. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The process of getting settled there, even amidst the chaos of the legal battle, made me realize something important. I was still capable of creating a new life for myself. I didn't need to rely on Thomas or Lydia. I had the strength to stand on my own. But that didn't mean it was easy. The loneliness crept in at night when I found myself staring at the empty walls of my apartment, wishing for the comfort of familiar faces. It was then that I realized just how much I had lost, not just my home, but my sense of belonging, of being loved and appreciated for who I was. And yet, as painful as it was, I knew I had to keep pushing forward. No one else was going to fight this battle for me. It was up to me to show Lydia and Thomas that I would no longer be their doormat, their fallback, or their source of financial support. If they wanted to take the house from me, they would have to do it on their terms, but they weren't going to get away with it without a fight. The day I finally received the call from Brian that the hearing had been scheduled, I felt a sense of both relief and dread. it was happening. The time had come to face my son and daughter-in-law head on, to show them that I wasn't just a shadow in their lives anymore. Brian had advised me to be strategic, to not show my cards too early. He was confident that the legal case for the lien would hold up. But the truth was that I was walking into uncharted territory. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about my dignity, my identity, and my right to exist as something more than an appendage to someone else's life. The day of the hearing arrived faster than I had expected. I had spent the night before preparing, reviewing every document, every record of payments I had made, trying to memorize the facts. But no matter how much I prepared, there was no avoiding the inevitable feeling that crept into my stomach as I approached the courthouse. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was a battle for my place in my own family, my home, and my future. When I walked into the courthouse, the familiar sense of dread crept in. The building seemed to echo with the heavy footsteps of others going through their own struggles. As I checked in at the receptionist's desk, I was greeted by a lawyer from Brian's office, a woman named Karen, who was there to represent me. She had a kind face, but her eyes held a sharpness that reassured me. She was here to fight for me, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was alone in this. "Ready?" Karen asked, as she led me toward the courtroom. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, my voice betraying the nerves I had tried to suppress. As we walked, Karen went over the details once more. "We have a solid case. The mortgage payments you've made, the evidence of the changes to the house, they'll help. Just stay calm and let me do the talking." I nodded, feeling a strange calm wash over me. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. For once, I wasn't going to let fear or guilt make my decisions for me. The courtroom was large and sterile, filled with people who all seemed to be waiting for their own turn to be heard. My son and Lydia were already seated across the room, their faces a mixture of annoyance and discomfort. Lydia kept glancing at her phone, clearly irritated that she was even having to go through this. Thomas sat beside her, looking every bit the entitled man he had become. He didn't even look up as I entered, and I wondered if he was pretending I wasn't there, hoping I would just go away. As I took my seat beside Karen, I noticed that Lydia's expression hardened when she saw me. There was no warmth, no apology, just a look of contempt. I could tell this wasn't going to be an easy fight, but it was one I was determined to win. The judge, an older man with glasses perched on the end of his nose, called the room to order. He looked at the files in front of him before glancing at us over his glasses. "Let's begin. Mrs. Wilson, would you like to present your case first?" Karen stood up and turned to face the judge. "Yes, Your Honor. We are here today to settle the matter regarding the property located at 202 Maple Avenue, specifically regarding the equity lien that my client Audrey Wilson has placed on the property after having made mortgage payments for the past 2 years, despite no longer holding legal title to the property." I braced myself, the weight of her words hitting harder than I expected. This wasn't just about me being evicted from my own home anymore. It was about something far bigger. My payments, my contributions were now being recognized as a legitimate claim. Karen went on to explain the specifics of the case, detailing every payment I had made and presenting all the records from the bank, including the automatic payments I had made from my account. I couldn't help but feel a bit of pride swelling in my chest as Karen presented the evidence. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control. When it was Lydia's turn to speak, she stood up, her tone dismissive as she spoke to the judge. "Your Honor, Mrs. Wilson is claiming that she made payments on a house that she no longer owns, but we have the legal right to sell the house. She signed it over to us. We're simply trying to move forward with our lives." I could hear the subtle accusation in her voice, as if I was the one being unreasonable, as if I was the one trying to stop them from moving on with their lives. But I didn't let it faze me, not anymore. Lydia continued. The house is worth far more than it was when we moved in. We're entitled to sell it and start over. It's not right for her to be asking for a stake in the property just because she made a few payments. She's doing this out of spite. I could see Karen's jaw tighten, but she didn't interrupt. Instead, she turned to the judge. Your Honor, the payments my client made weren't just out of spite. They were made because she believed she was helping her son and daughter-in-law to ensure they could live comfortably. She was trying to help them achieve their dreams, and in doing so, she unintentionally created an interest in the property. I could hear the judge nodding, his expression hard to read. I understand. And Mrs. Wilson, you're requesting that your lien be honored, essentially asserting your right to the property despite no longer holding legal title. I straightened up, my heart beating faster now that the judge was addressing me directly. I stood and said, Yes, Your Honor. I didn't ask for this situation. I didn't ask to be put in the position where I had to fight for what was once mine. But I've worked hard for this house. I've given everything to this family, and I've paid the mortgage out of love, not out of obligation. I don't want to lose the house, but I won't allow it to be sold off to strangers without receiving what I'm due. The words felt foreign coming from my mouth, but they were true. I had put my heart and soul into that house, and I wasn't about to let anyone take it from me without a fight. The judge cleared his throat, turning to Thomas and Lydia. You've heard Mrs. Wilson's request. Given the circumstances, I'm inclined to rule that the lien should be honored, but we will need to look at this further. I will set another hearing in 2 weeks, during which time you will need to provide evidence of your financial situation. If you wish to contest this, you may present your case at that time. A mix of shock and anger passed across Thomas's face as the judge finished speaking. He looked at Lydia, who looked equally stunned by the turn of events. The hearing had not gone as they had hoped, and I could see that the weight of this legal battle was finally sinking in for them. As I walked out of the courthouse, I felt a strange sense of vindication. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't just an observer in my own life. I was taking action, standing up for myself and demanding respect. I wasn't going to let anyone push me aside anymore. Not my son, not Lydia, not anyone. Brian's office was only a short drive away, and when I arrived, I was greeted by a calm, reassuring smile. How did it go? He asked. We have another hearing in 2 weeks, I said, my voice steady. But today was a win. I'm not backing down. Brian nodded in approval. You did well today, Mrs. Wilson. Now we just need to keep the pressure on. And just like that, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about me reclaiming my life, my voice, and my dignity. 2 weeks passed, and every day felt like a constant battle, both mentally and emotionally. The hearing had given me a sense of hope, but I knew there was still a long road ahead. The case wasn't over, and while the judge had ruled in my favor by allowing the lien, there was still the matter of Gregory and Lydia's resistance. They didn't want to lose the house, especially not now that their plans for Oakwood Hills had been dashed. Martha and I had spent the next few days gathering every shred of evidence we could find. Old photos, receipts, bank statements, and property records that would demonstrate my consistent payments. Martha's nephew Brian had been a constant source of support, guiding me through each legal hurdle and helping me understand the strategy. On the surface, everything seemed calm. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. The tension was palpable, and I couldn't help but feel the weight of everything that had happened. The way Gregory and Lydia had turned on me, their indifference to the years of love and support I had given them. The feeling that they saw me as a burden, something to be disposed of. The second hearing arrived sooner than I expected. I dressed carefully that morning, donning a simple but elegant navy dress that made me feel strong. It was a far cry from the way I used to dress, always considering what my family thought was appropriate. Today, I dressed for myself, for the woman I was becoming. As I stood in front of the mirror, Adjusting my earrings, I could see the change in my reflection. The woman staring back at me was not the meek mother-in-law who had always kept quiet to avoid conflict. No, this woman had found her voice, and she was not going to be silenced again. Martha picked me up as planned, and we made our way to the courthouse. I wasn't as nervous this time, though I could feel the tension rising in my chest as we entered the building. When we reached the courtroom, I found that Thomas and Lydia were already there, sitting in their usual positions. The atmosphere was different now. They were no longer the ones who held all the power. The tables had turned. "Do you think they'll settle today?" Martha asked as we took our seats. I shrugged, unsure. "I don't know. I've done everything I can, though. I won't let them walk over me anymore." The judge arrived, and the hearing began promptly. As expected, Lydia immediately launched into her argument, claiming that the lien I had placed on the house was a violation of their rights, and that they had every intention of selling the house to fund their own future. She spoke with all the bravado of someone who believed she was in the right, but her words were laced with frustration. "Your Honor," she said, "we've already made plans to sell the house. My husband and I need to move on with our lives. This lien is an obstacle to our plans." I stood up, feeling a sense of resolve settle over me. "Your Honor," I began, my voice firm, "I did not place this lien out of spite. I did it because I was forced to take control of a situation that I did not create. I've made payments on this property for 2 years, hoping that my son and daughter-in-law would come to appreciate the home that has been in our family for decades. Instead, I was evicted from my own home and relegated to the garage." There was a murmur in the room, and I saw Lydia's face flush with anger. I didn't care. I had nothing left to lose. This was my moment to stand up and demand the respect I deserved. Gregory, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. "Mom, I understand that you're upset, but this is our house now. You signed it over to us, and legally it's ours. What do you want from us?" "I want what's rightfully mine," I said simply. "I want my investment in this house recognized." "You didn't build this house, Gregory." "I did. Your father and I poured everything we had into it. You and Lydia think you're entitled to sell it, but you've taken advantage of my generosity. I've been paying the mortgage because I thought I was helping you, but I'm done being taken for granted." The courtroom was silent. Even Lydia seemed at a loss for words. I could see her seething, but I didn't care. I wasn't the woman who would let her stomp on me any longer. I had fought for too long to be invisible. The judge cleared his throat, breaking the tension. "I understand both sides of this argument," he said, his voice calm but authoritative. "However, the matter of the lien must be addressed. Mrs. Wilson has made significant financial contributions, and there's merit to her claim. I'm inclined to grant the lien in full, but I will give you both time to come to an agreement. If no resolution is reached within the next 30 days, the lien will remain, and the house will not be sold without addressing Mrs. Wilson's claim." The words hit me like a wave. For the first time, it felt like my actions had been validated. They couldn't just sweep me aside. I had a right to be heard, and the law was on my side. Thomas stood up, his face twisted with anger. "This isn't over, Mom," he spat. "We're not going to let you ruin everything." I felt a pang of guilt at his words, but I didn't let it show. Gregory had already made his choice, and it wasn't about me anymore. It was about protecting what I had worked for. The judge dismissed the session, and I followed Karen and Martha out of the courtroom. As we walked down the hall, Martha turned to me, her expression filled with pride. "You did great," she said. "Thanks," I replied, feeling the weight of everything slowly lift. "I'm just tired of being treated like I don't matter." "You matter," Audrey Karen said with a smile, "and now they'll have to see that." As we left the courthouse, I took a deep breath, letting the fresh air fill my lungs. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. I had stood up for myself, for my home, and for my future. And no one could take that from me. The fight wasn't over yet, but I was ready. I wasn't going to back down. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. Gregory and Lydia didn't call, and frankly, I wasn't sure if I wanted them to. I could still hear the frustration in Gregory's voice from the courtroom, and though he hadn't said much since I knew he hadn't come to terms with what had happened. He still thought he had the right to control the house, and I still couldn't believe it had come to this point. How had we gone from being a family to being strangers with conflicting interests? Martha kept urging me to take things one step at a time. This is a marathon, not a sprint, she would remind me, but it was hard not to feel impatient. After all, the house had been mine for 35 years. How could they think they could just push me out like this and expect me to accept it? I spent the next few days carefully going over the details of my financial records, with Brian making sure everything was in order. It was exhausting, but necessary. I also called the bank again, making sure that everything on their end was documented correctly. There were no more surprises this time. I needed to be sure that I was protected, especially with Gregory and Lydia likely planning their next move. Martha and I went through the house once more, checking everything for any last details I might have missed when I first returned. I found myself standing in the den, looking at the fireplace where Richard and I used to sit and talk. I could almost hear his voice in the stillness of the room. It didn't feel like the same house anymore. Not because of the cosmetic changes, but because it no longer felt like a home to me. It felt like a battleground. Later that evening, just as the sky turned dark, there was a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw Gregory standing on the other side. He looked different, tired, maybe even a little defeated. His usual confidence seemed to have faded. He wasn't dressed in his usual crisp, expensive suit. Instead, he wore a more casual shirt and jeans, a stark contrast to his usual polished appearance. "Mom," he began, his voice soft, "can we talk?" I stood there for a moment, not sure what to say. The door had been closed between us for so long, and even now I wasn't sure if I was ready to let him back in. But I nodded and stepped aside to let him in. There was a long pause as he entered, and we both stood awkwardly in the living room. Finally, Gregory spoke again, his tone quieter than I'd ever heard it. "I'm sorry, Mom. I've been thinking about everything about what you said in the courtroom. And I realize I've been wrong. I didn't appreciate everything you did for us." I was stunned. It wasn't the apology I had been expecting, but it was something. It was a start, and that's all I could ask for at this point. "You know," I said slowly, "this has been hard on me, Gregory. Not just the house, but everything. I've spent my life taking care of everyone, and when it came time for you to take care of me, I wasn't even a priority. I've been paying that mortgage for 2 years out of love, out of a desire to help you. But I can't keep doing it if you don't see me, if you don't respect me." "I do respect you," Gregory said, his voice strained. "I know I messed up. I've been selfish and I wasn't thinking about how all of this was affecting you. I wanted the house in Oakwood Hills. I thought it would fix everything." "You thought moving to Oakwood Hills would fix everything?" I repeated, disbelieving. "Gregory, you're not the only one with dreams. This house was my dream. It was Richard's dream. I've given up so much to make sure you had what you needed, and now I'm left with nothing." Gregory shifted uncomfortably. "I never meant for you to feel like that, Mom. I swear." We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of the conversation hanging in the air. I wasn't sure what else to say. His apology, while sincere, didn't take away the years of hurt. I still couldn't forget the way they had pushed me aside, treating me like I was a burden instead of a part of the family. But for the first time, I felt the smallest glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things could get better. So I began breaking the silence. What do we do now? Gregory hesitated. I don't know. I want to fix things. I want us to get back to where we were, even if that means we have to sell the house and start over. My heart hurt at the thought of selling the house. The thought of someone else living there, turning it into something completely different, felt like a betrayal. But I knew it was part of the process. Maybe in the end, it would be what we needed to move forward. We'll figure it out, I said quietly, staring at the familiar walls of the living room. But I need you to understand something, Gregory. I'm not going to be invisible anymore. I'm not going to let anyone push me aside. Not you, not Lydia, no one. I have my own life, and I deserve to live it. Gregory looked down at his hands, his shoulders slumped. I get it, Mom. And I'm sorry. I want to do better. I really do. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I could see the genuine regret in his eyes. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope that we could rebuild. Maybe our relationship wouldn't ever be the same, but maybe it didn't have to be. Maybe with time we could find a new way to connect. After he left, I sat on the couch thinking over everything that had happened. The legal battles, the emotional turmoil, the long road ahead. It wasn't going to be easy, but I wasn't backing down. I had fought for this home, for my family, for my place in this world. And I was finally taking back control. The next day, I received a call from Brian. There had been some movement on the legal front. He explained that the situation was far from resolved, but it was clear that the more Gregory and Lydia resisted, the harder it would be for them to move forward with their plans. Don't let them wear you down, Mrs. Wilson, he advised. They're counting on you to back off, but you have the law on your side. And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. I was Audrey Wilson, and I was taking my life back. The weeks that followed my conversation with Gregory were a blur of emotions, paperwork, and tense confrontations. As much as I wanted to believe that things could go back to the way they once were, reality kept reminding me of the painful truth they had crossed a line, and so had I. In many ways, I had spent too long appeasing too long, trying to keep the peace. I realize now that if I wanted to be seen and heard, if I wanted to protect my rights and my legacy, I needed to stand firm. I spent my days with Brian going over documents, reviewing every piece of evidence that supported my claim to the house. I had been meticulous when it came to paying the mortgage, keeping track of every transaction. If anything, my actions had shown nothing but love and responsibility. But love alone wasn't enough anymore. Gregory and Lydia continued to try to ignore the inevitable. They'd come by a few times to check on things, but it was clear to me they were hoping I'd back down, that I'd relent and let them off the hook. But I wasn't going to make it easy for them. They wanted the house fine. They could have it, but not without understanding what they were truly losing. It wasn't just the house that had changed. I had too. The woman who had stood silently in the background, taking care of everyone else, was gone. She had been replaced by a woman who had learned that sometimes you had to fight for your space in the world. It was a painful realization, but one that had given me strength I hadn't known I had. One morning as I walked to the kitchen, I saw my reflection in the window. I looked different. Stronger, more determined. The weight that had been sitting on my shoulders for so long had finally started to lift. It didn't matter that I was older. It didn't matter that Gregory and Lydia had made me feel small for so long. I had earned my place. It was time I started acting like it. Martha checked in on me regularly. "How's it going with the paperwork?" she'd ask. I could tell she was concerned, but she was also proud of the steps I was taking. "You're doing the right thing, Audrey," she'd say. And every time she said it, I felt a little more sure of myself. Then the unexpected happened. It was a Friday afternoon when I received a call from Gregory. He sounded different, tired, almost defeated. He asked if we could meet, just the two of us. I agreed, though a small part of me dreaded it. Every time I met him, I couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal hanging in the air. But for the first time, I allowed myself to wonder if maybe, just maybe, we could start repairing things between us. I met him at a small cafe in town. It was the same one Richard and I had gone to on our wedding anniversary years ago. The familiarity of the place made the situation feel even more surreal. As I walked in, I spotted Gregory at a corner table staring out the window. When he saw me, he straightened up and I could see the weight of the past few weeks on his face. "Mom, I'm sorry," he said before I could even sit down. The words were rushed, as if he were afraid I might say something before he could get them out. I sat down across from him, unsure how to respond. The last time we had spoken, it hadn't gone well, and now he was sitting there apologizing. I had no idea what to make of it. Part of me wanted to believe him, wanted to hear him say the words that would heal the wound he had created. But another part of me, the part that had learned to protect myself, wanted to be cautious. "I know I hurt you," he continued, his voice low. "And I know I've been selfish. I've been focusing on what I wanted, and I didn't think about how this whole thing was affecting you." I didn't say anything at first. I let the silence stretch out between us. It was hard to find the words. He was my son, but I felt like I didn't know him anymore. Not after everything that had happened. "I'm listening," I finally said, my voice steady. Gregory looked up at me, his eyes filled with guilt. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said in the courtroom, about how I've taken you for granted. You've always been there for me, for us, and I didn't see that. I didn't appreciate it." I took a deep breath, and now he said, his voice cracking slightly, "I don't know how to make things right. I've messed up, and I know that." I didn't know how to respond to that. Could he truly understand what he had done? Could he really grasp the depth of the hurt he had caused? "You've already taken the first step," I said quietly, "acknowledging that you were wrong. But actions speak louder than words, Gregory." He nodded, his gaze dropping to the table. "I know. I've already started making changes. Lydia and I," he hesitated, and I could see he was struggling. "We've decided to sell the house, to pay back the money you've contributed." I was surprised. I didn't expect that. I thought they would resist, cling to the idea of Oakwood Hills. But here he was, acknowledging that the house was no longer his to take for granted. I paused, letting the words settle in. "And what about us?" I asked, my voice quiet. "What happens between you and me?" Gregory looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and something else, maybe hope. "I don't know, Mom. I know I've hurt you. I know I can't undo what I've done. But I want to try. I want to be a son you can be proud of again." I studied him for a long moment. For the first time, I saw a glimmer of the boy I had raised, the one who used to climb into my lap when he was small. The one I had always loved unconditionally, even when he didn't deserve it. "You've got a long way to go," I said finally, "but we can start with this. We'll take it one step at a time." It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't everything I had hoped for, but it was something. And for the first time in a long while, I felt the tension in my chest ease. Maybe we could rebuild. Maybe, just maybe, there was hope for us yet. The weeks after Gregory's unexpected apology were filled with a cautious sense of optimism. For the first time in years, it felt like there was room for healing, for change. The pressure that had been weighing me down began to lift slowly, and I found myself returning to my life with renewed purpose. I spent my mornings working at the cafe, learning to juggle the demands of the job with the satisfaction of independence. My days were no longer consumed with trying to make ends meet for others. They were mine again. At the end of every shift, I could walk away with a sense of accomplishment, something I hadn't felt in years. Meanwhile, Gregory and Lydia began the process of selling the house. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. On one hand, I had made my peace with the fact that it was no longer mine. The home I had built with Richard, was becoming a distant memory. On the other hand, it felt like they were closing the door on everything I had worked for. The house meant more than just bricks and walls to me. It was the embodiment of my life, my family, my memories. But at the same time, I knew that nothing would change unless I took the steps to create a new life for myself. My home, in the truest sense, was no longer a house. It was wherever I chose to build it. One evening, as I sat on Martha's porch with a glass of wine watching the sunset, I found myself reflecting on the past few months. The transformation that had taken place in my life wasn't just physical, it was emotional, psychological, even spiritual. I had spent so long running on autopilot, just existing, that I had forgotten who I was. But now, for the first time in a long time, I was waking up to my own power. Martha had been by my side through everything. She had listened to my frustrations, my anger, my sadness. She was the one who had reminded me that I wasn't just Gregory's mother or Richard's widow. I was Audrey Wilson, and that made all the difference. "Are you happy?" Martha asked me one night after the world had quieted down and the noise of the day had faded away. "I think I'm getting there," I replied, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. "I don't know if I'll ever be the same, but maybe that's not such a bad thing." Martha smiled and clinked her glass against mine. "Good, you deserve it." I smiled back, the first real smile I'd had in ages. There was no more pretending, no more shrinking. For the first time in years, I was standing tall on my own terms. But life had a way of throwing curveballs when you least expected it. It was early one morning, just as I was finishing my shift at the cafe, when I received an unexpected call. It was from the bank. I had assumed it was just another routine check-in regarding my mortgage, but the voice on the other end was serious. "Mrs. Wilson, we've received a formal request from your son and daughter-in-law regarding the property at Maple Avenue. They're requesting that the lien be lifted immediately." I felt the ground shift beneath me. I had been bracing for this moment, but hearing the words out loud felt like a punch to the gut. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "You'll need to speak with my lawyer," I said, my voice steady despite the shock I felt. "They're not getting off that easy." I hung up and sat for a moment, the weight of it all sinking in. For a while, I thought we had reached some semblance of understanding. I thought the worst was behind me. But it seemed that my son and daughter-in-law were still determined to get their way no matter the cost. I thought back to the conversation I'd had with Gregory in the cafe when he had come to me with his apologies. Had it been genuine? Had he really understood the gravity of what they had done? Or was this just another game to them? A way to push me aside, to sweep me under the rug once more? I called Brian, who had been helping me with the legal side of things, and told him about the bank's call. His response was calm but firm. "We'll have to fight this. It's time to put your foot down, Audrey. They can't just erase your contributions like this." And fight we did. The next few weeks were filled with meetings, phone calls, and paperwork. I watched as Brian worked tirelessly to protect my rights, ensuring that the lien would stand and that Gregory and Lydia wouldn't be able to sell the house without addressing it. But as much as I wanted to feel like the victory was within my grasp, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. This was my son, the person I had spent my whole life loving and raising, fighting against me. And for what? To sell the house and move on with their lives as if I never existed. It hurt more than I could put into words, but I refused to let it break me. One afternoon, as I was sifting through old photographs in my bedroom, a voice interrupted my thoughts. I turned to see Gregory standing in the doorway, his face filled with uncertainty. "Mom," he said softly, "we need to talk." I closed the photo album, setting it down on the nightstand. About what I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He walked in slowly, as if unsure how to approach me. "I know things haven't been easy between us. and I know I've hurt you more than I can say. But I'm asking for your help. We need you to live the lean. It's the only way we can move forward." I studied him, my heart heavy with conflicting emotions. I had hoped that his earlier apology had meant something, that it wasn't just another manipulation. But standing here now, facing him in my own home, I wasn't sure what to believe. "You don't get to keep taking from me, Gregory," I said quietly. "I've given enough. I've done everything I could to make sure you and Lydia had what you needed, but I can't keep giving at the cost of my own peace." His shoulders slumped, and for the first time I saw the weight of his actions on his face. "I understand," he said, his voice quiet. "I've messed up, and I know I can't undo everything, but I'm asking you to help us one last time." I shook my head slowly. "I can't. Not like this. You've already taken too much." His gaze dropped to the floor, and I could see the guilt creeping in again. "I'm sorry, Mom. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just thought you might help." "You've already made your choices," I replied, my voice firm. "Now you have to live with the consequences." Gregory didn't argue. He simply nodded and turned to leave, leaving me standing there feeling more resolute than ever. I watched him walk away, feeling the finality of our conversation settle in. There would be no more giving in, no more compromising. For the first time, I was protecting myself, and it felt like a victory. But as I sat back down on my bed, the sadness I had been carrying for so long crept back in. Was this really the end? Could I truly rebuild my relationship with Gregory, or had everything already been broken beyond repair? I didn't have the answers, but what I did have was control. Control over my life, my choices, and my future. And that, for the first time in years, felt like enough. The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and moments of self-reflection. For the first time in my life, I was making decisions for myself without worrying about anyone else's expectations or needs. It was liberating and terrifying all at once. Despite the legal battles over the house, the emotional toll began to fade. I'd spent so many years putting my family's needs above my own that now, when I had the chance to focus on myself, it felt as though I were learning how to breathe again. Martha and I continued our routines, and while I still worked at the cafe, I was beginning to feel the weight of the decision I had made to start over. The small victories I celebrated each day, finding joy in the little things, rebuilding my home, and forging a new sense of independence, were adding up. One evening after my shift, I sat down to dinner in my little kitchen, looking around at the new layers of life I had woven into this space. The old oak cabinets still had a little of the character they'd always had, even with the repainting. The walls had been stripped of the grays and whites that had replaced the warm colors of Richard's design. And though the house wasn't perfect, it was mine. I didn't need it to be perfect anymore. What mattered was that it was mine, and for the first time in years, I felt truly at home. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a message from Brian, my lawyer, updating me on the progress of the lien case. I had been nervous about what he might have to say, but when I opened the message, a small sense of relief washed over me. "We're close. The bank's been cooperative, and we've made headway in the negotiation. The lien should be secure, and we'll be able to take action soon." I set the phone down, a smile creeping onto my face. There was a quiet joy in knowing that I wasn't going to let Gregory and Lydia take everything I had worked for. My contributions, my sacrifices, they mattered. And now it seemed they would be acknowledged. Just as I was savoring the small victory, my doorbell rang. I was startled. I hadn't been expecting anyone. When I opened the door, I saw Gregory standing there, his hands shoved into his jacket pockets, his expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He looked at me as if he wasn't quite sure what to say next. "Can I come in?" he asked, finally, his voice tentative. I hesitated, but then stepped aside. "Come in, Gregory," I said quietly. He walked in, his eyes scanning the room, the once familiar house, now a little different. It was clear he wasn't used to seeing it like this, without the polished, impersonal updates that Lydia had preferred. "I just wanted to see you," he said, his voice strained. "I've been thinking about everything, about what happened between us." I nodded, unsure of where this conversation was going. After everything that had happened, I wasn't ready to forgive him yet, but I wanted to hear him out. "I've been talking to Lydia," he continued, pacing a bit. "And, well, things aren't as good as we thought they'd be. Our plans fell through the banks calling us. And I realize now that maybe I should have listened to you. I shouldn't have let it go this far." My heart ached as I watched him, the son I had known all my life, trying to grapple with his own mistakes. "Gregory, you made your choices," I said quietly, "and those choices have consequences." He stopped pacing and turned to face me. "I know," he said, his voice almost breaking, "and I'm sorry. I can't take back the things I said or the way I treated you, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking. I was just selfish." I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to hold on to my anger, to refuse him, but I had spent so many years accommodating everyone else. Maybe now was the time to listen. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said after a long pause. "But I can understand why you're saying this now. It doesn't change the past, but it means something. It means that maybe, just maybe, you're starting to understand what you put me through." Gregory's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in a long while, I saw the son I had raised. "I know it's not enough," he whispered, "but I want to make it right. I'm willing to work for it." For a long moment, we just stood there, facing each other in silence. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step in the right direction. And in that moment, I realized that maybe this was the first of many steps toward healing, not just for him, but for me as well. "I can't promise anything," I said gently, "but I'm willing to try. Not for your sake, but for mine." Gregory nodded, a small flicker of hope in his eyes. "That's all I'm asking. Just a chance." I didn't know what the future held for us. I didn't know if our relationship would ever be what it once was. But I did know one thing: I was no longer the woman I had been. I was stronger, more resilient, and I had learned that I deserved to be treated with respect. As Gregory left, I stood in the doorway, watching him walk down the driveway. The weight of everything that had happened in the past few months still felt heavy on my shoulders. But now there was a spark of something new. Something that hadn't been there for a long time. Hope. It wasn't a grand sweeping thing, but a quiet, persistent light. And for the first time in years, I felt like I had the strength to keep moving forward, no matter what came next. The days after Gregory's visit were filled with a strange mixture of quiet reflection and tentative optimism. I had begun to see the changes within myself, and as I worked through the legal battles and continued building my life back up, I could feel myself becoming the woman I had always been, but had lost sight of for so long. Martha checked in often, and I had started to call her more frequently, not just for advice, but because I found comfort in our conversations. I had grown used to her laughter, her straightforwardness, and her unwavering support. We were a team in a way I hadn't fully appreciated until now. My new routine was settling into something I could work with: early mornings at Rosie's Cafe, quiet afternoons spent slowly transforming the house back into something that felt like mine, and evenings where I took long walks in the neighborhood, breathing in the air and reminding myself of the beauty of being present in my own life. I wasn't sure what Gregory and I had now. There was no grand reconciliation, no instant healing, but there was something new, something fragile yet real, a chance to rebuild not just our relationship, but also the trust that had been broken. I had learned something valuable from the past few months. The idea that I had spent decades making myself smaller for others had finally begun to fade. I didn't need to shrink anymore. I didn't need to apologize for my needs or desires. I had the right to claim space in the world, to take up room. And maybe, just maybe, that was the most important lesson I could ever learn. One afternoon, while I was tending to the garden, I heard the familiar sound of a car pulling up. I turned to see Gregory's car in the driveway once again. My heart skipped a beat, unsure of what to expect. He stepped out of the car, holding something behind his back. As he walked toward me, I wiped my hands on my apron and tried to suppress the nervous flutter in my chest. "Mom, I hope I'm not interrupting." He began, his voice tentative, as if unsure of how to approach me. "No, of course not," I said, trying to keep my tone even. I had come to expect the unexpected, but part of me always braced for disappointment. "What brings you by?" Gregory hesitated for a moment before revealing what he was holding: an old wooden picture frame. It was one that had once hung in the hallway, a family photo from when he was a child, Richard and I standing proudly behind him as he held up a trophy from his first soccer game. "I found this." Gregory said, his voice softer than it had been before. "I thought it belonged here. Back where it belongs." He handed it to me, and I took it from his hands, a wave of emotion washing over me. The photo had been part of this house for so long that I had almost forgotten it existed. The memories it held, the birthdays, the laughter, the arguments, the milestones, suddenly seemed so distant. Yet they were also a part of me, a part of the foundation of who I was. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "It's good to have it back." We stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. Finally, Gregory broke the silence. "Mom, about what I said before, about choosing a house over family, I didn't mean it. I was just angry, and I didn't know how to say I was sorry. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, that you didn't choose the house. You chose not to be erased." I looked at him, unsure of how to respond. A part of me wanted to hold on to the hurt, to remind him of everything he had put me through. But another part of me realized that sometimes the only way forward was to acknowledge the progress we'd made, however small. "I know," I said quietly, "but I think you're starting to understand, even if it's not all clear yet. I don't expect you to fix everything, but what matters is that we keep trying, that we don't give up on each other." He nodded, his eyes welling up with emotion. "I'm trying, Mom. I really am." The conversation shifted slowly and gently as we talked about the future. Not just the house, not just the lien, but what it meant to rebuild the trust that had been broken. Gregory admitted that he had been scared, that he didn't know how to deal with the changes in his life. It wasn't just about the house. It was about him coming to terms with everything he had taken for granted. As the conversation continued, I realized that I was no longer looking for validation from him. I had given up the need for his approval. It was liberating to realize that I could love him and still stand firm in my own right to be treated with respect. By the time the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I knew that this was a pivotal moment for both of us. A small shift, a tentative opening, but enough to give me hope that maybe, just maybe, the relationship we once had could be rebuilt in a different form. A healthier, more honest version of what we had been. "How are things with you and Vanessa?" I asked, not wanting to pry, but curious about how their life had changed since the uproar. Gregory's face tightened, but he gave me a small, weary smile. "We're working through things. It's not easy, but we're trying. The new apartment's okay, not as big as the house we wanted, but it's ours. It's a start." I nodded, trying to hold on to the hope that he and Vanessa would find their way, just as I had found mine. "That's good," I said simply. "Mom," Gregory said, his voice low. "Thank you for not giving up on me. On us. I don't know if I deserve your forgiveness, but I'm really trying to make it right." The vulnerability in his voice struck me in a way that no apology could. It wasn't just about the words he said, it was about the change in his heart, the effort he was willing to make. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't carrying the weight of everything alone.
"We'll see how it goes," I replied with a smile, "but I'm glad you're trying."
As Gregory left that evening, I stood on the porch for a long while watching him drive away. The house was quiet the way it always was now, but it no longer felt like the echo of what was lost. It felt like a beginning. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I would ever get back everything I had lost, or if Gregory and I would ever completely repair what had been broken. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was standing in the right place. I had made my peace with the past, and now I was ready to move forward, to rebuild my life piece by piece, just as I had rebuilt this house. With time, patience, and a little bit of hope, anything was possible.